If ye abide in me, and my words abide in you, ye shall ask what ye will, and it shall be done unto you. So today I wake with joy, expecting but the happy things of God to come to me. I ask but them to come, and realize my invitation will be answered by the thoughts to which it has been sent by me. And I will ask for only joyous things the instant I accept my holiness. For what would be the use of pain to me? What purpose would my suffering fulfill? And how would grief and loss avail me if insanity departs from me today, and I accept my holiness instead? Father, my holiness is yours. Let me rejoice in it, and through forgiveness be restored to sanity. Your Son is still as you created him. My holiness is part of me and also part of you. And what can alter holiness itself? Father, my holiness is yours. Let me rejoice in it, and through forgiveness be restored to sanity. Your Son is still as you created him. My holiness is part of me, and also part of you. And what can alter holiness itself? Right, so thank you so much for being still with me in the Troubadour, and thank you so much for joining today. So today is a meeting where the idea of, you could say like sound design, yes, it's a big word, but sound design or sounding comes in. And since everything that we practice, in fact, like in our meditative, in our transformational journey, has to do with listening. It is like not related to sounds that we hear in an outer world or anything. It's like, no, this is an inner listening. So it's in listening, not really with your ears at all. And with the wholeness of you, learning to listen with the wholeness of you. The same as you want to experience happiness, well, you will have to recognize your holiness, your wholeness. Like, the wholeness implies a complete connection with everything. And in fact, you being everything. Time and space collapse in you, all occurrences at all the time. Like, that sounds a bit big, but it's more like listening with your whole being, you could say, is listening whole-mindedness. Yeah, listening with your whole mind. And why am I saying this? It's like, well, with your ears, you hear specifically differences. Like if I speak words, you will listen to the different words and you think that has a certain meaning, or that refers to something that has meaning. It doesn't have meaning of itself. If I say yes or no, in fact, it does not have meaning of itself. This becomes obvious in a conversation. If somebody says no, it doesn't really mean no. It could also mean yes. This so far that we come in a human conversation. So the no isn't no necessarily, and the yes isn't yes necessarily. So the yes is just chosen, is a symbol for something. You could say for an agreement. Now below that, you could say even deeper in the matter, it is truth cannot be symbolized. The truth doesn't need words for it to be what it is. And here's the difficulty in our experience of ourselves, because we think in terms of differences, in terms of images, in terms of different sounds, different aspects of sound, and different harmonies. Like a dissonant, for instance, you hear as an almost like a tension. It is not harmonic. So a dissonant is not harmonic and falls away from the harmonic scale, you could say. So that's something that is different for that. You can use it in the music to say bring in some tension, to make, say, increase the tension of letting the harmony being born again in the next moment. You recognize this. Who knows? I might give examples. I don't know. I don't know yet, because I'm not really here in like in a harmony study or anything, but more the aspect of listening in which you discover. That's in fact the thing I want to turn on today in our listening, with our whole being. I want to turn on your adventurous pair of ears, inner ears that want to discover something, and it can do that. There will be material, there will be an expansion in learning to listen in a different way. And in fact, it is you could almost call it a mindfulness exercise. Because it is like you want to be completely present in listening, otherwise you miss it, what this is about. So it reaches beyond the standard way of listening to sounds. Or it is so magnified by taking out of context and hearing it as a sound in itself instead of within a context, that it becomes something else. So literally you hear the sound, in fact, for the first time, even though you recognize it. It could be a garbage bin being thrown on the ground, but normally you hear it in a street setup, in the context of street, and here you just hear that sound, and then suddenly it becomes a sound in itself. And this sound can become whole in itself. In fact, it is whole in itself. It doesn't need anything. It doesn't need a context for it to be whole. Now, this is a far out thought, of course. This is like far out of expanded thinking say perceiving, but that's the great thing. In fact, it is the sensitivity with which you listen to a poem, or which you listen to music and discovering something new that you never heard before. But the subtlety, for instance, in the poetry is of the same level, because how could you hear rhyme is still linked to recognizing and correlating between the sentences, suddenly discovering, oh my God, that falls into place just nice. That's lovely. Like in that, there's a flow suddenly. Something happens there. And that to a certain extent gives you, it's satisfying to listen to. So you recognize it. It harmonizes with your own inner harmony. So is, of course, the universe, a verse, like a sounding. And that's an interesting part too. Because the sounding, it's like these are, what I'm talking about is all aspects of that. We listen to some examples in which someone discovered something in sound, and that you might not recognize right away, but so the invitation is then to listen to it with your whole being instead of your ears and saying like, well, I heard his name and I don't like him. Like, no, this is beyond that. This is not anymore like if you like the music or like what is playing, but more go with the one that is talking about it, and in fact look over his shoulder to discover what he discovered, because that is you might never have heard that. So I have two examples. One of them is Steve Reich. He's a composer, sound composer, and he was into drumming a lot. Like he did rhythmic compositions, and that could be on the drum, that could be on the marimba, that could be on. So we have an example of the marimba and also of the drums. And then we have Sukai Ken. He's a Japanese sound designer who went really far into, in fact, taking sounds out of its context and using it in a whole new way, and in fact creates a soundscape with it. Now you might recognize the word soundscape and sounding and all this, because I wrote about it in the introduction for the Troubadour, and so the next meeting we will work with that too, or at least in the preparation. Now we had poetry, but next week it will have everything to do with sound and sound design. And we don't make it complicated as these guys have done, complicated in the sense of really deeply, they went really deep into their research to discover something. Now, okay, so why did I choose these two guys? There will be one more, is John Cage. So these are quite controversial in a certain sense, composers that, like John Cage, for instance, wrote a symphony for 6 fire wagons with the sirens of them and all that kind of stuff. So it's like that's quite extreme. That's not top 40 music. And so Sukai Ken, I know because I use this sound recordings for my own compositions. So it's really beautiful to hear it. And then there's Steve Reich. He composed something that I heard someone play in one of the concerts I went to, and I like, wow, this is so beautiful to discover it and go into that a little bit. So that's Kuniko Kato. She's also Japanese. She plays the music. Anyway, so these are my favorite guys, so to speak, in sound design and playing with music in a very discovering sense of doing that.
So the idea of starting low and gradually moving up the instrument, which gives you a drastically, the time you play something on the bottom, the time you get to the top of the marimba by itself, it seems like another instrument. It seems like and you have that feeling of just, you're up north. Then you go into the glockenspiel and you feel like you're in an igloo. I mean, it has all kinds of organic, metaphoric effects on people, which are fairly, people were remarkably similar in many ways. I think the ideas that are ingrained in any Western musician are at the basis of drumming, but it's in their application to a new instrumentation and duration, rate of change. The rate of change is enormously slowed down. If you say, wait a minute now, It's like when you're with somebody, say, could you repeat that? Because you want to understand it more clearly. That's why you ask something to be repeated.
Okay, so to make it complete, we are going to listen to a short version of one of the compositions. It's 3.5 minutes. So I'm going to share it now. So then at least you know what he's talking about. You hear the rhythm, but you also hear more space or less space. So it's like there's a beat, but also there can be no beat. And in that, there's more and more space. Yeah, so seeing this live is incredible because it takes like maybe 10 or 15 minutes and you go through the whole hoop from low to high. So that's really lovely. So here there was you get a bit of an idea, and that was exactly what I wanted. So this is with an idea of exercise, you could say. What they used was a tape, so they first play it, record it, then they play that and actually play with themselves in repeating the same theme, but engaging with what is already there. And you can do that layer up layer, and that's what I heard in this concert that I ever went to. It's like you hear probably 5 or 6 layers. I think this was with 8 marimbas. So that's huge, and C played the 7th or the 8th marimba, which is this big wooden block machine. So that's really lovely to discover that repetition does not have to be boring. Like, no, music cannot be boring in that sense. So there's something to discover. There's a different way of listening to it. And this is just an exercise. This is just seeing that, yes, indeed. So I add 1 step to my rhythm, for instance. I keep it simple. First 2, then I make 3, then I make 4, and keep repeating that. Then I make 5 different, touch 5 different tones. You can do this on the piano too, or any kind of keyboard, or who knows how you will do this. So that's more like for the next week and an idea to keep in mind. But since we have so much offering, in fact, there's so much available in sound design or discovering music, or in fact an exercise in a wholehearted whole being listening. There's so much available. So the next step then would be to listen to Sukai Ken, the sound designer, who uses literally sounds from the surroundings to come to a whole different spiel. Literally, he comes into something completely different. It is even completely mesmerizing to listen to it. I said this is to me fun to take a look at. It's really great to see that, and you see that it's so well recorded that you hear it very spatial, especially when you wear headphones, of course. But it's like you hear it very spatial. It gives you an atmosphere in which a new context that the subjects that you see are not combined with, really. It's like, so that gives a completely different feel to the whole setting. And you see that there's still some kind of composition in it, even though there's no melody, or there's an intensity, there are sounds that break it, there are sounds that first have a certain function then change completely. So there's a lot going on, you could say. There's a lot to listen to. And not that understanding it is so important, but it's more like, well, it certainly opens your ears to listen to it in a different way. Now if you hear a regular classical piece, you would say like, wow, how is that possible that anyone can write something harmonious? Like that becomes very much like a whole different thing. And if you would compare it with a classical piece, it is like unbelievable that there's music being made that actually has a sequence, has a certain following, has a certain rhythm, has a certain melody, and it is structured like the music of Bach or whatever. It's like that. It's so structured. And here that opened, and there's a combination of sounds. There's a discovery to be made more than anything else. So I'm not going to make a big comparison between what Bach did and what Steve Reich is doing. Steve Reich and Bach are probably pretty close to one another in a certain extent because of the rhythm and the harmony sequence and the mathematical harmonies that Bach was using, as well as Steve Reich too. So there's a great familiarity. Okay, so now we're not teaching here musicology of any kind. So this is purely, in fact, opening, like a little bit of warming up to open our ears to learn to listen in a different way. Since everything that we do, in fact, is out of the ordinary. You come out of the ordinary in your transformational journey, and nothing is what it seems anymore. You cannot play that game anymore. So here then in self-expression, you could say you're going to become the expression of something new, and not that you have to say develop that in the sense of making it, but certainly develop it by allowing that to occur within your own experience of yourself. Now, that's a huge point. This is really the basis of self-expression, to let a new you say speak through you. This is the voice speaking to you, or the inspiration spirit speaking through you, using your hands, your feet, and all this. Now, with doing that in a playful way, there's nothing wrong with that. So that's why dance can be really helpful. That's why music can be very helpful, or even coming to a whole new way of expressing yourself that you haven't used before. Instead of only reading knitting magazines or taking care of your cats and dogs, suddenly you start to open up a book about quantum science or rocket science, and you discover something that makes total sense to you. While before that, you were just doing normal human things, so to speak. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but in other words, it's like with an open mind, with a miracle mind, everything is possible and can speak to you, not out of habit or social adaptiveness, but more as it triggers, it resonates with you. That's why you pick it up and actually do something with it. Now that, to me, that part of the journey is very interesting, because there's a freedom connected in it, and a non-conformity in a certain sense. Is like there's a real authenticity connected to it, and this you will like very much. So you have your own discoveries that you're going to make, and however that comes to you, it's like sometimes it's just being shared with someone, sometimes you meet someone who actually opens your eyes for something, or suddenly you hear something that you never heard before. And you go into a museum, well, you never went to a museum. Like I never went to a museum. Suddenly I'm in a museum and I discover a whole world. And I love to take a good look at all these things. I never did that before, and not as I'm interested now. Literally your eyes open. And that's also like you become more sensitive to let a resonance take place. In fact, you take time to let that occur. You notice it and you enjoy it. You take time to let it come to you. Now, this is the same with, in fact, with the poetry too. So today we're sharing some expressions, some poetic expressions. I came up with a poem, and so I'm going to show that to you. And it's based also on the musicians, the music of Ruichi Sakamoto. And a flower is not a flower. So I had like, this title is wild to me. I love it. So that resonates big time with me, because in my awakening, I got to the point where I suddenly saw what a flower can be. Like I discovered a new universe in the flower. So that's why I had like this, flower is not a flower. I know what you're talking about. If you mean what I have seen, oh yes. So now I made a poem and tried to express myself using a very specific format. I'll come back to that later, but I will show you the video first. On a beautiful morning not far from here, a radiant being walked mindful in a garden. The approaching clouds didn't cause any fear. Suddenly the daylight started to darken. Rain poured down, the wind increased, relentlessly weather dominated, no pardon. The being delighted and well pleased, mesmerized by the quick successions, a deeper layer of experience released. Vision opened like a chordal progression, heavenly heights as a castle tower. Transcendental focus, no more transgression. Completely overwhelmed by divine power. Look at this flower, it is not a flower. Nothing is what it appears to be. Open your eyes beyond the form. No more limiting images is what you will see. Stay in the eye of the storm when chaos seems to be around. The spiritual eye is the new norm. To old beliefs and habits you will not be bound. New inspiration is always now given. Desirable harmonics cause a new sound. To the edges of your awareness you are driven. Grace waiting to give you a shower. Don't let fear your limbs anymore stiffen. No need to let your mood go sour. Open your eyes, a flower is not a flower. The sun shines in our garden again. The being graciously waters the plants and stays confidently in its zen. A subtle highway constructed the ends, as one is the invisible communication. But listen and you will hear universal chants. The being received this as an initiation, ready for some wisdom of divine order, objective imagery up for translation. In consciousness, crossing a border, leaving behind the human cower, freedom of the inner hoarder. Source is what the being empower. Illumined vision, a flower is not a flower. Yeah, so that was the poem and the composition. So the music was mixed with it, made with it, and the imagery was also like gives a certain support to. Now I'm not going to explain it too much, but it's more like the somebody asked like, why are you speaking that fast? And it's like, well, there must be the passion running through. I have no other explanation. It's not that I'm in a hurry. It is just like, this is how it's being said. I have nothing to do with it. So don't ask me why I do the things that I do. This is how it came about. This is part of the authenticity that is working through me in every aspect that I do. I have no idea about it. That literally just happens, and I hear it when it's right. So it's like, okay, that's finished. Now we can use it, and so on and on and on. So that's the lovely part of it. Now you can say like, okay, so what does that have to do with an idea of troubadour? Well, the troubadour had a freedom of expression. He could say anything. He could sing. He could make it sound like a love story, while it's actually about the mayor of the village having a new girlfriend, or who knows what. Like he had he or she had an incredible freedom to express. It was just music. You could always say it is just music. No, it's not like hot news or anything. No, there's an enjoyment in it that is shared. So you recognize it, and that's why you love to hear it. So that's a beautiful role to play. Yeah, so now I'm starting to get really curious about what you have for us, like in the non-public part of this meeting. So the assignment that will come up, you can imagine that's sound design-ish, and the very basics that we do with that. That's going to be fun. So you receive that by email. But first, we're going to do the non-public part of this meeting.
Ô bien-aimé, enfermé dans ma tour d'argent, pourrais-je reprendre notre danse d'antan? Pourrais-je un jour te revenir, de ta demeure juste me souvenir? Ô bien-aimé, de ma citadelle, j'entends la miraculeuse nouvelle de la forteresse de mon âme, comme un message. Tu t'incarnes. Ô bien-aimé, tu es ma connexion, tu es chaque respiration, la merveille et la magie, jour présent d'une vie à l'infini. Nul mot pour dire sur quel astre je suis, bercé par la mélodie dans le jardin de mes nuits. Nos visages, embrassés par la lumière, d'un souffle d'amour, le tout s'est ouvert. Nulle peur traverse mon cœur, car l'amour pur demeure. Comme un battement d'aile, comme un tambour scande, éternel. En refuge, tu m'offres tes yeux, partage en union, scintillement des cieux. Deux âmes éclairées se souviennent, comme elles s'aiment.
Pour l'amour de mamie, pour l'amour de son nom, j'ai parcouru la terre, j'ai quitté ma patrie. J'ai chanté ses louanges, j'ai pleuré et j'ai ri. J'ai pris la part des anges, j'ai payé les violons. Pour l'amour de mamie, pour l'amour de son nom, j'ai tenté l'expérience, j'ai pensé, j'ai tout fait, j'ai tout dit. Dans la décohérence, chat noir, chat blanc, chagrin ou gris, j'ai déclaré forfait, fermé les yeux, imploré la vision. J'ai cherché la réponse, j'ai trouvé la question. J'ai donné ma langue, je ne sais plus rien de la vie. J'ai perdu la raison et le yin et le yang. Et puis tous mes amis, dans l'aveu de mon âme, j'ai demandé pardon. J'ai retrouvé ma flamme et mamie et son nom. J'ai écouté mon cœur et sa main m'a béni. Entendre d'une seule voix le brin de mélodie qui murmure en silence « Merci pour ton don ». Maintenant se dévoile un nouvel horizon, une lumière lui dans le vide de l'esprit, une lumière lui invisible, infinie, rendant grâce à la vie en sa pleine création.